Calder was trudging slowly along the fence line, looking for any broken sections after the stormy night. As he bent down to check a set of coyote tracks, he noticed a faint red stain on the snow. At first, Calder thought it was blood from a hunt, but as he moved closer, his heart suddenly clenched. Lying curled up beneath a low pine tree, nearly buried in snow, was a little Apache girl. Maybe 6 years old. Her lips were purple from the cold, her tiny body shivering like a blade of grass in the wind. Her eyes were shut tight, her breath barely more than a wisp of fog. "Oh God," Calder whispered, dropping to his knees. He placed a hand on the girl's back. She was so cold. The chill shot straight through him. Without hesitation, he pulled off his heavy coat, wrapped it tightly around her, and lifted her up, pressing her against his chest to share his body heat. "Do not fall asleep. You hear me? Stay awake." His voice trembled in the wind. On the way back to the cabin, Calder could feel her breath growing weaker with every step. It felt like he was carrying her entire life in his arms. As soon as he stepped inside, he lit a fire as fast as he could, placed the girl near the stove, and put a pot of water on to warm. Then she murmured something so soft, he almost missed it. "Nay, me." Calder leaned in, whispering back, "Yeah, Nami, just keep breathing. Let me handle the rest." Outside, the snow kept falling. But inside the cabin, one fragile life clung to the last warmth of winter. 2 days later, the snowstorm still had not let up. The prairie was buried under a thick, endless blanket of white. Calder had stayed up nearly the entire night, keeping the fire going, making sure the little girl stayed warm. Every time Nami shivered with fever, he would press his warm hand to her forehead and whisper, "Hang in there, little one. It is not time to give up yet." By midday on the second day, as Calder was splitting wood out in the yard, the wind suddenly shifted, carrying with it a heavy, dragging sound, like someone pulling their weary body through deep snow. He set down the log and turned around. Out of the blinding whiteness appeared an Apache woman. She was tall and broad-shouldered like a warrior, her arms muscular but covered in bruises. Whip marks, knife wounds, and dried blood trailed from her neck down to her waist. Her breathing was sharp and broken, almost spent. She stopped just a few steps away from Calder. Her deep, dark eyes were wary and exhausted, but still alert. Her voice was hoarse and strained. "You are keeping my daughter." Calder did not move forward, nor did he back away. His voice was strangely calm. "She is inside the cabin, still alive. If you want, go on in." The woman staggered toward the door, nearly collapsing as her hand touched the wooden frame. Calder reached out just in time to catch her arm. It was as hard as oak, but cold as stone. He helped her inside. As the firelight flickered across the sleeping girl's face, the woman's body trembled with a sudden, powerful shiver. Tears welled up and clung to the corners of her bloodshot eyes. She knelt beside Nami, her trembling hand brushing the child's cheek. A choked sob escaped her lips. "Nami. My little Nami." Calder poured a cup of warm water and placed it beside her. "Sit down. You are bleeding." She looked up at him, still guarded, but no longer desperate. "My name is Talia." Calder gave her a quiet nod. Outside, the storm still screamed as if trying to tear the world apart. The road leading to the Apache mountain range was completely blocked by snow. Talia had no strength left to stand, let alone travel. Calder added more wood to the stove, then said, "You and the girl, stay here. When the weather clears, we will figure it out." Talia stared into the fire for a long moment, then whispered, "No white man has ever helped us like this." Calder simply replied, without pride or praise, "I just did what was right." From that moment on, though neither of them said it out loud, they both knew the snowstorm was only the beginning of a bond neither of them had expected. That night, the wind had quieted some, but the cold still lingered like a ghost, clinging to every corner of the cabin. Nami was fast asleep, her breathing more even now, thanks to 2 days under Calder's care. Talia sat against the wall, her large frame covered in wounds, but her mother's eyes never left the child. Calder sat by the stove, feeding more wood into the fire. The orange glow lit his face, casting a rare moment of calm in the midst of a brutal winter. Talia glanced at him for a long time before speaking, her voice rough, like every word was being torn from her throat. You never asked me. What happened? Calder set the log down and looked at her through the flames. I figured, if you wanted to talk, you would. And if you did not, I was not going to press. Talia let out a faint laugh, tired, but tinged with a hint of respect. No white man ever says that. She pulled the thick blanket tighter around her shoulders, taking a deep breath as if gathering the courage to open a door sealed shut by blood. My tribe was attacked. They killed everyone. The elders, the children, anyone who could not run. Her voice cracked, like stone breaking under ice. I knew they wanted Nami. She is still young, but she carries the blood of the old chief. They wanted that blood gone. Calder clenched his hand slightly, but said nothing. I hid her under a bush. I ran the other way, to draw them off. I wanted them to chase me, so she could live. She bowed her head, fists clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white. I thought I would die, but fate did not let me. The firelight shimmered in her wet eyes. When I came back, the bush was empty. She was gone. Everyone was gone. Calder asked softly, how long did you search for her? 2 days. No food, no sleep. I wandered like someone out of their mind, until I collapsed right at your doorstep. Silence fell. Only the crackle of fire remained. Calder spoke gently. You did what any mother would have done. Talia looked at him, her eyes deep and heavy, filled with despair, but now flickering with a fragile hope after seeing her daughter alive. I thought I lost her forever. Calder nodded toward the sleeping child. No, she is here. And she is safe. Talia lowered her head, her voice breaking. And only you made that happen. That night, between the firelight and the howling wind outside, the distance between Calder and Talia began to fade, not through touch, but through the wounds they both understood too well. The next morning, the snowstorm had not yet passed, but inside the small cabin, something warm and unfamiliar had begun to fill the air. Nami was more alert now, eating a few spoonfuls of the porridge Calder had cooked. Each time she held his hand, Talia's deep black eyes seemed to soften just a little. Calder was up on the roof, making repairs. Despite her injuries, Talia insisted on helping. Her strength made him glance her way more than once. She lifted a heavy wooden plank with one arm, the kind that usually took 2 grown men to carry. By late afternoon, the snow had eased into a soft flurry. Talia stood by the window, dim light falling across her scarred face. Calder walked in with a bowl of warm water. You should get more rest. Talia looked at him. Her eyes no longer held the guarded look from earlier days. There was something else now, something that made Calder hold his breath. Calder. She said his name for the first time. He stopped, not too far away. Talia glanced down at her rough hands, then back into his eyes, weighing every word, every meaning, every line that stood between them. You saved my daughter. You protected her, like she was your own. Calder replied softly, I just did what was right. Talia stepped closer, close enough that he could see her breath rising in the cold air between them. Her voice was low, steady, and so honest it hid nothing. You are a good man. She placed her strong, slightly trembling hand on his chest, where his heart was pounding. And then, Talia said something no woman says lightly, something spoken not with desperation, but with the clarity of a warrior who had walked through fire and lived to tell it. Plant your seed in me, and my daughter needs a father beside her. Calder stood still, not out of shock, but out of meaning, out of the weight of her trust, because the woman standing before him was not pleading. She was offering her future to a stranger, with open eyes and no regrets. He looked into her eyes, eyes filled with sorrow, and a new spark of hope. Talia, his voice turned husky. Are you sure? She rested her forehead against his, whispering, I have lost everything. But you are where I want to stay. There was no kiss, not then, no rush of passion, only 2 people standing close, breathing the same air, understanding each other deeper than words ever could. Outside, the snowstorm was fading, and inside the cabin, something new was beginning, something neither of them had been searching for, yet somehow, they found each other. Thank you for being here. If this story brings back memories of dusty afternoons, of hoofbeats echoing in your chest, then go ahead and subscribe to my channel. So every day, we can sit together again, and I will tell you another tale from the west. That evening, the snow finally stopped. The sun set behind the mountains, leaving a stretch of dusky purple and blue across the prairie. Calder built a fire larger than usual, partly for warmth, but mostly because the cabin felt like it needed more light tonight, as if something important was about to happen. Talia sat at the edge of the bed, the firelight dancing across her sun-browned skin, bringing out every strong feature now softened by exhaustion. Nami was fast asleep near the stove, wrapped in the thickest blanket in the house. Calder walked in and set a bowl of warm water beside Talia. "Your wounds need to be cleaned again," he said, trying to keep his voice even. Talia looked at him for a long time. So long, Calder began to wonder if he had said something wrong. Then she stood, stepping slowly until she was right in front of him. "Are you afraid I will change my mind?" Her voice was low and hoarse, but solid like stone. Calder took a deep breath. "I am afraid. I am not good enough. For the both of you." Talia placed her large, calloused hands on either side of his face, gently guiding his gaze to hers. "You saved my daughter. You gave her warmth. You kept her alive when the world turned its back on her." She leaned her forehead against his, whispering like it was a vow. "No one could be better than you." Calder could feel her breath so close it sent his heart racing. Not from desire, but from something that had bloomed too fast, too strong to be ignored. Talia continued, "I do not want pity. I want to be chosen." Calder replied softly, "I already chose you." The moment those words left his lips, Talia pulled him in. There was no rush, no taking, just a kiss, slow, deep, filled with gratitude and a quiet hunger to live again, as a person, not just a survivor. Calder wrapped his arms around her, holding that strong body that now trembled not from cold, but because, for the first time in so long, she felt safe. That night, they lay together on the old wooden bed. Calder gently cleaned Talia's wounds with warm water. Each time he touched her, she closed her eyes not from pain, but from the feeling of being cared for, something she had forgotten. As she rested her head on his chest, her hand placed over the steady beating of his heart, she whispered, "If tomorrow morning you want me to leave, I will." Calder tightened his arms around her. "Tomorrow morning, and every morning after, I want you here." Talia smiled faintly in the dark, a small smile, but enough to change the whole winter. Their first night together was not loud. It was simply two people who had lost everything, finding each other at the moment they needed it most. Winter seemed to linger, refusing to leave the prairie. But one morning, Calder stepped out onto the porch and noticed the snow was soft beneath his boots. For the first time in weeks, sunlight broke through the gray clouds. The air was still biting cold, but the wind had eased. The sky was changing. Inside the cabin, Nami giggled beside the firewood pile, her first laugh since Calder had met her. Talia was tying back her daughter's hair, her large hands moving with surprising gentleness. Calder paused for a moment, just watching them. A warm current ran down his spine. That feeling, the feeling of belonging, was something he had not touched in a long, long time. By midday, while Nami napped, Talia stepped out onto the porch where Calder was repairing a mallet. She stood beside him, so quietly he thought she had come just to watch the horizon. But then she spoke, slow and clear. "Calder." He looked up. Talia stared out at the distant mountains, her breath long and full, as if she had been waiting years to say the words. "I have been running, month after month, FROM, battle to battle. I have no one left." She turned to face him, and her eyes, once full of guarded strength, now revealed something unexpected. Vulnerability. "I want to stop." Calder set the mallet down and listened. Fully present. "I want to stop running. I want to live somewhere I do not have to look over my shoulder every night." Talia took a slow, steady breath, then said, "I want to belong to you. If you will have me that way." In that moment, Calder did not think. He did not weigh it, or fear it. He simply stepped forward and placed both hands gently on her shoulders. "You already do." His voice was low and steady, like a promise buried deep in the heart long ago. "You have everything you need, right here." Talia closed her eyes. Her broad shoulders trembled slightly, not from sadness but from relief. For the first time since losing her tribe, she felt kept. Then she guided Calder's hand to her belly, a breath sharp as fire. I think I carry your child. Calder did not answer right away. He looked into her eyes that had seen death, and now flickered with life. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and spoke softly, but with the weight of stone. Then that is all the more reason for you to stay. Inside the cabin, Nami stirred and called out loudly, "Mom, Calder!" The two of them looked at each other and shared a small smile, the smile of people who had finally found home. That morning, the first sunlight in weeks filtered through the window, casting a soft, golden glow across the cabin. Calder was tending the fire when he heard small footsteps rushing toward him. Nami, wrapped in a blanket, stood with sleepy eyes still heavy but sparkling like a quiet lake. She stood in front of him for a moment, silent, as if gathering courage. Then Nami gently tugged at the hem of his shirt. "Calder, can I call you father?" The words hit his chest like a warm wind. Calder knelt down so his eyes were level with hers. Nami looked at him without blinking, her dry lips parting slightly, waiting for his answer like her little soul was hanging by the thinnest thread. He placed a hand on her soft black hair. "You already have." Nami blinked, confused. He smiled deep and kind. "You have called me father every time you hugged me in the morning, every time you held my hand when you were scared, and every time you stayed close to me. You just had not said it out loud yet." Tears welled up in Nami's eyes, but not from sadness. She threw her arms around him with such force he almost lost balance. Calder held her tightly, his chest tightening with a feeling he thought had died with his wife long ago. Talia stood quietly in the doorway, watching. The sunlight touched her long black hair. There was no jealousy on her face, no hesitation, only a deep, quiet peace. She whispered, "I knew she would choose you." Calder looked at Talia, still holding Nami in his arms. In that moment, he realized this place was no longer the cabin of a lonely man. It had become the home of three. That afternoon, while Nami napped, Calder pulled out an old wooden box hidden beneath the bed. Inside was a photograph of his late wife, the gentle woman who had left him 4 years ago during the outbreak. He sat in silence, staring at the picture. There was no more pain, only a soft sorrow that had never faded. He kissed the edge of the frame, then placed it in a deeper compartment, one only he knew. On the shelf, he placed something new in its place. A small seed pouch, hand-stitched by Talia, with familiar Apache threads woven into the seams. A quiet symbol, but enough to say he had chosen the path for his life. As the evening settled in, the three of them sat on the porch. The spring breeze swept gently across the prairie. Nami sat in Calder's lap, and Talia leaned against his shoulder. No one said anything grand, but in that silence, a truth became clear. They were no longer three people lost in the world. They had become a family. Spring laid gold across the prairie. New grass began to push through the last of the snow. Calder built a new stretch of fencing. Nami toddled along, carrying nails, while Talia helped lift the heavy boards. Her strength made everything feel half as hard. The cabin was no longer just a shelter from the cold. It was becoming a home, built by hands trying to rebuild a life. One morning, Calder and Talia were digging behind the cabin. The breeze carried the scent of early wildflowers. Talia handed him a few kernels of corn and beans. "These were what my mother used to plant, and now they belong to our home." That word "our" settled in Calder's chest like something soft and unfamiliar, a feeling he thought he would never be allowed to feel again. Nami helped water the soil, her tiny hands gripping a wooden dipper nearly bigger than her head. Every time the water splashed her face, she burst into laughter, pulling Calder's laughter with her, and a gentle shake of the head from Talia. Where once there was only wind and silence, now there was the sound of a child laughing, the sound every home needs to come back to life. By late afternoon, the three of them built a chicken coop. Calder hammered nails, Talia held the boards steady, and Nami ran around collecting dry leaves, declaring them the most beautiful nests in the world. No one argued. To them, the world needed nothing more than that. As the sun began to set, the whole family sat on the porch. The spring wind was soft, and the scent of wood smoke hung in the air. Talia leaned against Calder's shoulder, his arm wrapped around her waist, while Nami slept in her mother's lap. Talia whispered, "We are not married." Calder smiled. "We do not need to be. No wedding rings. We do not need those either. No preacher. No vows. She paused, looking up at him. Does that make you sad? Calder kissed her forehead gently. Talia, homes are not built on vows. They are built on the fact that we are still here. Every morning we wake up. Talia exhaled softly, like a leaf falling to the earth. Her hand rested on her belly, where a child carrying both their blood was quietly growing. Day by day. In that moment, Calder knew. There were no rings, no ceremonies, but everything felt more real than any tradition he had ever known. The old cabin, once cold and lifeless, was now so full of warmth, there was no darkness left. The spring wind drifted across the porch, touching three people leaning into each other, a family not bound by obligation, but by the choice to stay. And they had chosen forever. Love does not need to begin with a promise, nor be held by ceremony. It grows in the quietest of moments, a hand tending a wound, the warmth of a fire, a child saying Father for the first time. True love is not loud. It does not demand. It just asks that two people, once broken, be brave enough to open their hearts again. And when they choose to stay, not out of duty, but because their hearts led them there, that is love strong enough to outlast winter and time. Then, sir, there is love stated. That's in that stay. In the end, I only hope that you too are loved, safe, and happy. I love you, my dear listeners of Wild West Storytelling. Tell me what this story meant to you. Leave a comment below. Tap the number 8 if you enjoyed this story. And do not forget to subscribe for more thrilling tales from the Wild West. Harsh screams, the pounding of heavy boots, and the sound of a body hitting the ground tore through the peaceful stillness of the farm. Eamon burst outside, his heart nearly stopping at the sight before him. His grandfather, Silas Ryland, was surrounded in the courtyard by Vernon Hale and 20 thugs. They were beating him with rifle butts, kicking him in the chest, and dragging him across the ground like he was nothing more than a lifeless object. Silas struggled to stand, blood streaming down his cheek, his voice hoarse and strained. This land is not for sale. The words made Vernon laugh with pure disdain. Old man, I am giving you exactly 10 days. If you do not sign the papers, I will come back and finish this. Then he nodded a signal. 2 of his men threw a rope over the branch of the old oak tree in the front yard. Before Eamon could reach them, they had already grabbed Silas by the legs, yanked him upside down, and left him hanging, head dangling toward the ground. Blood dripping steadily, Eamon screamed, his voice cracking from horror. Stop! He is an old man. You are going to kill him. Vernon just shrugged, brushing off the plea like it was a passing breeze. Whether he lives or dies is up to him. Not me. They walked away laughing, their cruel voices echoing, leaving Eamon shaking as he scrambled up to cut the rope. When Silas dropped, his body was limp, his breath so faint it felt like a gust of wind could carry it away. Eamon cradled his grandfather, his tears mixing with blood, and in that desperate moment, he remembered the debt of honor his grandfather had once spoken of, the one debt that might be able to save them now. As soon as he finished bandaging his grandfather's wounds, Eamon knew he had no other choice. Silas was breathing faintly, like a flame on the verge of going out, and the 10-day deadline Vernon Hale had given them felt no different from a death sentence. If Eamon did not act now, his grandfather would die, and the Ryland farm would disappear from the map of this harsh western land. Under the flickering light of the small kitchen's oil lamp, Eamon recalled the story his grandfather had once told. Years ago, during a devastating flood downstream, Silas had rescued an Apache boy, carrying him across the raging waters with nothing but his worn-out arms. That boy was Calder, the son of the tribal chief, and Silas had said only one thing. Not because you are Apache, but because you are a drowning human being. Eamon had never imagined that debt would ever need to be repaid, but tonight, with his grandfather lying there gasping for breath after being strung up in a tree, he understood. This was their last hope. Eamon packed a few pieces of dry bread, a water pouch, a rusty knife, and an old gun into his saddlebag. He looked at his grandfather one last time, gently brushed back Silas's silver hair, and rode off without a word. Night had fallen. The desert wind scraped at his face like claws. The road to Apache territory would take more than 2 days on horseback, crossing barren mountain ranges and treacherous ravines where a single misstep could erase a man without a trace. But Eamon did not hesitate. He spurred the horse forward as if his very life depended on every gallop. The first night, he set up camp near the edge of a dry creek. He slept in fits, constantly stirred awake by distant howls of wolves. Exhaustion dragged at his eyelids, but each time he thought of Silas hanging upside down from that tree, the nightmare jolted him back to alertness. By the second day, the sun scorched so fiercely it blistered his skin. His water ran low, his lips cracked, and his throat burned with every breath. Even his horse was panting. But when he finally spotted the rows of Apache flags flapping along the distant mountainside, Eamon felt his heart pound with new strength. However, the moment he set foot on tribal land, a sharp whistle pierced the air, followed by an arrow stabbing into the ground right in front of his horse's hooves. From behind the rocks, 4 Apache warriors emerged, their faces painted in solemn war patterns, bows drawn tight and ready. Eamon dropped to his knees instantly, raising both hands, his voice trembling but clear. "Please, let me see Calder. My grandfather is Silas Ryland. He once saved Calder's life during the Great Flood." The warriors exchanged glances. One gave a signal. Eamon's eyes were blindfolded, and he was led away. In the darkness, his heart pounded not from fear of the Apache, but from the fear that he might have come too late to save his grandfather. When the blindfold was removed, Eamon found himself standing in the middle of a massive ring of fire, surrounded by dozens of Apache warriors. The hide tents stretched upward like towering shadows across the red earth. Ritual drums echoed in deep, steady beats that made his heart thump in rhythm. An elder warrior spoke. "White man, you said you came to see Calder. Give your reason." Eamon took a deep breath and dropped to his knees again. "My grandfather, Silas Ryland, is dying. He was hung upside down and beaten nearly to death by Vernon Hale and 20 thugs. I asked to see Calder because he once said he owed his life to my grandfather." The air around the fire went still. Then, from behind the warriors, a tall figure stepped forward. He stood with quiet authority, broad shoulders, and eyes that burned like fire in the night. It was Calder, now a leader, carrying the presence of a man forged by countless battles. He looked at Eamon for a long time, his voice deep and steady like the mountains. "I remember Silas Ryland. I remember the trembling hands that pulled me from death. I remember his voice saying, 'Live.'" Eamon bowed his head, his voice choked with emotion. "Please, help my grandfather. I cannot protect him alone. Only your people can stop the Hales." Calder stepped forward and placed a hand on Eamon's shoulder. The gesture held both acknowledgement and the weight of duty. "Silas saved my life without asking for anything. I am Apache. I do not forget a debt of honor." Then Calder turned and raised his hand high. A horn sounded immediately, long and sharp like a predator calling its pack. From every corner of the camp, Apache warriors surged forth, quickly forming ranks like a storm, ready to descend upon the valley. Not 10, not 100, but 500 warriors' faces painted in war colors. Long spears, wooden bows, and leather shields adorned with eagle feathers. A force so vast that the ground trembled beneath their steps. A young warrior looked at Eamon, wide-eyed in disbelief. "Boy, for one white man, our chief summons 500? That is no ordinary thing." Calder stepped into the center of the army, his voice thundering. "Today, we repay the debt of Silas Ryland." He turned to Eamon. "Stand up. From now on, you will ride with us." Eamon rose, his legs trembling slightly, but his heart ablaze with a new fire, a fire of hope he thought he had lost forever. Before the sun could even rise, the entire Apache camp stirred like a massive beast waking from slumber. Horses neighed loudly, saddles were tightened, and the rustling of leather armor echoed like a warning of an impending march unlike anything ever seen. Eamon stood amidst it all, feeling as if he were being pulled into the eye of a gathering storm. Calder mounted his bronze-colored warhorse, a headdress of eagle feathers atop his head, a mark of the commander. He raised his hand, and 500 Apache warriors moved as one. The discipline sent chills down Eamon's spine. The army set out just as the first light of dawn kissed the horizon. Morning sunlight caught the war paint on the warriors' faces, making them look like spirits stepped out of ancient legend. Eamon rode a horse Calder had given him, moving within the formation like a part of the force. Steep cliffs, narrow ravines, and wild hills did nothing to slow the Apache. They moved through it all light as wind, powerful as crashing waves. Eamon had never seen any army move so swiftly, so silently. Along the way, a warrior named Yaska glanced over at Eamon and said, "You white men have guns and laws. But we, Apache, we have something else. A promise." Eamon swallowed hard. He understood now that the only thing driving this march was the debt of honor owed to his grandfather, a kind of loyalty that had become as rare as water in the desert among the world of white men. By midday, the army halted atop a high cliff, from which they could look down into the valley where the Ryland farm sat, small and distant. Calder stood with arms folded at the edge, his eyes sharp as a blade. The Hales think Silas has no one standing behind him. He turned to Eamon, but they were wrong. Eamon gripped the reins tightly, his chest tightening at the thought of his grandfather lying there, waiting for death. But within him, hope began to rise strong enough to drown out fear. As the sun began to dip westward, Calder raised his hand. "Tomorrow," he said, solemnly, "if blood is spilled, we have failed our debt of honor." Eamon looked at the 500 Apache warriors standing ready behind him, and he understood that tomorrow, justice would come to the Ryland farm like a storm nothing could stop. "Thank you so much for being here. If this story brings back memories of the old days, the red dusty afternoons, the sound of horses' hooves echoing in your heart, subscribe to my channel, so that every day we can sit together and I can tell you another Western story." The next morning, the prairie lay beneath a thin veil of mist as Vernon Hale and his 20 henchmen rode toward the Ryland farm. They laughed loudly as they went, smug in the belief that victory was already theirs. To them, Silas Ryland was nothing more than a stubborn old man. And one night strung upside down must have shattered both his will and his strength. "Tie the rope," Vernon said, his voice tinged with a cruel delight. "We are not collecting papers today. We are collecting a corpse." His men burst into laughter, the sound wild and brutal as it echoed across the open field. One of them added, "Hope the old man's still breathing. Killing a dying man is no fun at all." They rode past the shattered fence they had broken the week before. The ranch gate creaked in the wind like a mourning cry. The main house stood silent, windows shut tight, no sign of life. Vernon spat onto the ground. "Look at that. One little scare and they're already hiding like rats." He signaled to 2 of his men. "Search the place. If you find the boy, grab him first. I want Silas to watch his grandson die before it's his turn." The 2 thugs kicked the door in and rushed inside, only to find an empty house. No tracks, no noise, not even a breath. "He ran!" they shouted. Vernon frowned. The corner of his mouth curled. But this time, not into a triumphant grin this time. It was irritation. Running won't help. In this God-forsaken land, no one's dumb enough to hide him. His men began spreading out across the yard, scanning for footprints, stomping their boots into the dry ground. One of them pointed to the old oak tree where Silas had once been hung. "There's still blood here. We should finish it right here." Vernon slowly pulled his Colt from its leather holster, spinning the cylinder like a man bored by a task he considered already done. But just as he opened his mouth to give the order, a strange, cold gust swept across the yard. The horses began to twitch and stomp, uneasy. The sky, clear only moments ago, seemed to darken. One of the men looked up, frowning. "Boss, do you hear that?" Vernon turned, ready to snap at him. But then he heard it too. A faint rustling, like hundreds of dry leaves swirling in the wind, coming from all 4 directions at once. None of Hale's men knew that just a few hundred yards away, 500 Apache warriors were tightening the circle, ready to descend like a storm and wipe out every trace of the evil Vernon believed he could bury beneath these skies. The strange sound grew louder and louder, like an underground wave, rising from deep within the earth. The Hale gang's horses began to shift anxiously, neighing in confusion. Some of the thugs tightened their reins, eyes darting. But none of them understood what was coming. Then an Apache war horn blared long, cold, and sharp as a blade slicing the sky. The Hale men jolted. Vernon spun around, squinting toward the eastern ridge. At first, there were only a few figures, But within seconds, the entire horizon began to move. Row after row of Apache warriors burst from the ridge on horseback, leather cloaks flying, red and black war paint across their faces, long spears held upright. Behind them came the archers, then cavalry carrying round shields carved with the image of an eagle. The number was beyond counting. One thug shouted, his voice cracking in terror, "Dear God, what are they doing here?" Not 100, but 500 Apache warriors, shoulder to shoulder, forming a massive ring around the entire Ryland farm. Dust rose in thick clouds under pounding hooves, and the earth trembled with each step, pushing the Hale gang to the brink of despair. Eamon rode among the front cavalry, his heart pounding in his chest as he watched Vernon's face twist from arrogance into sheer panic. Calder spurred his horse forward, riding alone into the open space. He did not draw a weapon. He did not need to. The power of 500 warriors behind him was enough to unnerve any army. His voice rang out, deep, steady, and cold as stone. "Vernon Hale." Vernon flinched at the sound of his name. "You tied an old man to a tree. Beat him nearly to death. Threatened his grandson. And you believed this land belongs to the strongest." Calder nudged his horse forward, his gaze sharp as a spear. "But here is what you fail to understand." He raised his hand, and 500 warriors lifted their weapons in perfect unison. The sound of metal and leather clashing sent chills down every spine. The Apache keep their word with the strength of an entire tribe. Then Calder lowered his hand, his voice rumbling like thunder. "Touch the Ryland family again, and we will follow you to the edge of the world." Vernon trembled so badly his gun slipped from his hand. One of his men broke down in tears. Others turned and ran, some dragging their horses behind them, some tossing away their hats and guns to flee faster. And in that chaos, Eamon stood still. He did not fire a shot. He did not draw a blade. The presence of 500 warriors was enough to end the evil. After the Hale gang scattered like a pack of animals chased to the edge of survival, the wide courtyard of the Ryland farm fell into an eerie silence. Not a silence of fear, but one of solemn majesty, as if the very sky and earth were bowing in respect to the presence of 500 Apache warriors. Calder turned and gave a signal. The archers spread out to scout the area. The cavalry swept along both flanks, and the medicine carriers moved swiftly toward the main house. Eamon rushed inside without hesitation. "Grandpa, I brought help. You are going to be all right." Silas still lay there, on the old wooden bed, his breath faint, but his eyes had begun to open. When he saw the silhouettes of Apache warriors filling the doorway, he flinched for a moment, then recognized Calder. Calder stepped forward, standing beside the bed. "Old man," he said, voice low and steady, "you pulled me from death once. Now, it is my turn to repay that debt." Silas managed a faint smile. "Thought I had to die first, before you'd show up." Calder let out a quiet laugh, and Eamon choked up. Immediately, 2 Apache women healers stepped in. They removed the bandages, examined the bruised and battered wounds, and applied a pungent herbal salve that made Silas wince slightly. But within minutes, his fever began to break, and his breathing evened out. Outside, the warriors began repairing the damage, mending the shattered fence, reinforcing the gate, clearing away broken wood, even digging out the well that the Hales had filled with dirt. 500 people worked like an organized wind. No need for orders or questions, only glances and instinct. A young warrior handed Eamon a sharp knife and said, "A man must know how to protect his home. But tonight, you will not need this. We will stand guard." Night fell. Apache campfires burned bright around the ranch, forming a glowing red ring of protection in the dark. Eamon sat at the doorstep, watching the firelight gleam off spears and arrowheads. This was not a scene of war. It was the image of a tribe of guardians protecting his home. When the moon reached its peak, Calder came to sit beside Eamon. "You did what many grown men would not dare," he said. "You crossed our lands alone. To save someone." Eamon clenched his fists. "I could not let my grandfather die. I just did what had to be done." Calder nodded, his gaze softening. "And because of that, we are here." Eamon looked out across the ring of fire, where 500 Apache warriors sat in silence, listening to the wind move across the prairie. For the first time in his life, he felt safe. Truly safe. 3 days later, as the sun began to rise over the horizon, its golden light spilled across the prairie like warm honey. The 500 Apache warriors had completed their mission. The Ryland farm was no longer a trampled wasteland. It had become a peaceful fortress, clean, steady, and stronger than it had ever been. Silas could now sit up. His body still ached, but his eyes were full of life. He leaned against the headboard, watching the Apache warriors prepare to leave, with the quiet understanding of a man who had just received a gift greater than life itself. Calder entered, carrying a small leather pouch. "It is time for us to return," he said gently. Eamon stood beside his grandfather, unable to hide his disappointment. "You are leaving? So soon?" Calder smiled the smile of a man who had lived long enough to understand how the world works. A guardian should stay only until the danger has passed. Stay too long, and the one protected forgets how to stand. He opened the pouch and took out an oval, shaped gray stone, its surface etched with a sharp blade in the shape of an ancient Apache symbol. An eagle's wings spread wide. The morning light hit it just right, making the stone softly glow. Calder placed it in Eamon's hand. "This is Tosahun, the stone of promise." Eamon looked at it, emotion rising in his chest. What am I supposed to do with it?" Calder placed a strong, warm hand on his shoulder. "Keep it close. When you carry it, you carry the strength of an entire tribe." Silas shifted, his voice still hoarse but steady. "Calder, I do not even know how to thank you." Calder shook his head. "Silas Ryland, you saved me when I was just a child. Today, we have only returned what should have been repaid long ago." Outside, the warriors gathered. The rhythm of hoofbeats rang out across the earth, their formation tight as massive spears pointed toward the distant mountains. Before mounting his horse, Calder turned one last time. "Eamon, from this day on, you are no longer the boy who ran from evil. You are the one who stood to protect your family. Hold on to that." Eamon clenched the stone in his hand, feeling its weight light in his palm, but heavy with honor, loyalty, and the burden of becoming a man. He watched as the 500 Apache warriors rode away, their horses fading into the horizon, leaving only golden dust trailing behind. Like a long ribbon fluttering in the wind, there were no cheers, no drums, only the sacred silence of those who had just fulfilled a solemn promise. Eamon stood, filled with gratitude and pride. He knew that in this moment, he had crossed the threshold of boyhood. From a trembling child beneath a tree, he had become a man who would carry loyalty forever. My friends, in a land where violence is often the law of the land, there are still good people who rise quietly, like lights that never go out. They do not seek fame or reward. They simply do what is right, because their hearts tell them to. And it is gratitude, something so small it is often overlooked, that holds us steady, that connects lives which once seemed worlds apart. Because sometimes, one act of kindness can save an entire life, or even an entire generation. It has been an honor to serve you. I truly wish you peace and happiness always. I love you, our dear audience of Wild West storytelling. Let me know what you thought of this story. Leave a comment down below. Type the number 8 if you enjoyed this tale. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more thrilling stories from the Wild West. Jackson Hale looked down at the crumpled deed, 200 acres for just $50. An absurdly cheap price, but for a broke rancher like Jackson, it was his last chance to start over. He stepped out of the truck and took a long breath, but he had only taken a few steps when he froze. In the middle of the cracked, dusty yard, under the blazing sun, 4 bodies hung upside down from a makeshift wooden post. Their hair dangled like long black ribbons, their hands bound tightly with steel wire, their skins stained with red dirt and covered in layers of fresh and fading wounds. They were 4 Apache women, young, strong, but tortured to the brink of death. Jackson stood in shock. Dear God, what the hell is this? One of them, the woman with the longest black hair, was still conscious. Blood trickled down from her forehead, dripping toward her lips from the force of gravity. She opened her eyes and looked at him through tangled strands of hair. You. she whispered, her voice weak and strained. You should not have come here. Jackson rushed forward, trying to get them down. Who did this to you? The woman squinted, her breath shallow and broken. They are coming back. You need to leave now. Jackson clenched his jaw. No. After everything he had just seen, he could not turn away. Jackson laid the girl down on the hard ground, his hands trembling not from fear, but from fury. Never in his life had he witnessed something so brutal. The other 3 women were still unconscious, their bodies limp like discarded dolls. The one who was awake, the woman he would later know, as Nayeli tried to sit up, but pain forced her back down. Jackson immediately caught her. Do not push yourself, he said. Let me help you. Nayeli tilted her head, her deep black eyes studying him, as if trying to figure out what kind of man he was. Then she said something that stopped Jackson cold. You are the new landowner. Are you not? Jackson blinked. How did you know? Nayeli gave a tired, bitter smile. Because no one comes out here. Unless they want to kill us. Or they are the unlucky fool who just bought this place. Jackson frowned. I paid $50 for this land. Why? Nayeli looked straight into his eyes, unwavering. Because it is a trap. Jackson stood still, the desert wind whipping red dust around his boots. She continued, each word cutting like a blade. The traffickers hung us up here to lure in the new owner. They want a witness, someone to pin the blame on. A poor, nameless man, living alone in the desert. Perfect for a fake confession. Jackson clenched his fists. They did all this just to kill you? To erase the evidence, Nayeli replied. We escaped from a major human trafficking network, and the man leading the hunt is a corrupt federal agent named Morrison. When she said the name, it felt like a cold wind swept down Jackson's spine. Elena, Rose, Lily, Maria. He hunted every one of them, Nayeli whispered, her voice weakening. We have been running for years, but this time, they will stop at nothing to kill us. Jackson placed a hand on her shoulder. No one deserves to go through this. I will get you inside. Find a way to take care of you. Nayeli shook her head sharply. No, you do not understand. They could be back any moment. She forced herself to her feet and pointed toward the distant dirt road. Listen to me carefully. You need to leave. Right now. If you stay, you will die with us. Jackson looked at the women lying unconscious in the dirt, their bruises, their skin marked by violence. He swallowed hard. Then he answered, slow but steady. You can tell me to go, but I cannot stand by and watch people die in front of me. Nayeli stared at him for a long moment. In her fierce Apache eyes, something shifted, part resistance, part fear. Then you need to understand, she whispered. They do not just want to kill us. They want this land, and anyone standing on this land becomes a target. Before Jackson could respond, the sound of an engine echoed from a distance, heavy, steady, drawing closer. Nayeli closed her eyes and gave a pained smile. Too late. They are here. At first, the sound of engines in the distance was just a faint rumble like thunder buried deep underground. But within seconds, Jackson realized it was getting closer. Fast. A plume of red dust began to rise on the horizon. Nayeli clenched her jaw, trying to stand even though her legs were still trembling. Jackson, listen to me, she gasped. Those are their vehicles. 3 of them. Black SUVs. No license plates. They come back on schedule to check our corpses. Jackson felt the blood in his veins turn to ice. They think you are already dead? Nayeli gave a faint nod. Yes. They hang us out here to die slowly under the sun. Saves them the trouble of getting their hands dirty. The engines were close enough now that Jackson could hear the rhythm of every cylinder. 3 vehicles. Not a beat out of sync. He pulled Nayeli into the shade of the porch, whispering, We need to hide. We have to move the others now. But Nayeli placed a hand on his chest, stopping him. Jackson, you do not understand. If they find even one of us still breathing, they will scour this desert until nothing is left alive. Jackson gritted his teeth. Then what do you want me to do? Leave you here? I cannot do that. Nayeli stared at him for a long time, so long that Jackson felt like she was weighing every inch of his soul. Then she spoke, no longer in warning, but as a challenge. A choice. You have two paths, Jackson Hale. 1. Get back in your truck. Drive away. And pretend you never saw us. 2. Stay here. And learn why 4 Apache women would rather die on this land than let them take us again. The wind kicked up, throwing hot dust across Jackson's face. He knew she was telling the truth. No tricks. No seduction. Just raw, brutal truth. The red dust grew higher in the distance. The vehicles were now in sight, 3 black SUVs, like hunting beasts that never tired. Jackson glanced at the 3 unconscious women, curled up in the weak shadow beneath the porch, their bruises dark and raw, steel wires still digging into their skin. He swallowed hard. You think I am the kind of man who would walk away? Jackson asked softly. Nayeli looked straight at him. Most white men are. When they see our blood, they turn their backs. Then you picked the wrong man. Jackson pulled the old gun from his belt and flipped off the safety. I am staying. Nayeli did not smile. She did not sigh. She just gave the slightest nod, like she had finally found something she had not dared believe in for years. Then come with me. We need to go down. Down where? Nayeli crouched, yanked up a loose wooden plank from the porch floor. A dark opening appeared below, cold air drifting up from the earth. A tunnel. Abandoned mine. And something deeper still. The sound of engines came to a stop at the gate. Nayeli looked toward the noise. Her voice dropped, like a curse being spoken aloud. They are here. Jackson had just managed to pull the wooden plank back into place when the sound of car doors slamming echoed through the yard. Heavy boots hit the ground, followed by the crackle of radios. They were right outside the porch. Move, Nayeli whispered, pulling him into the pitch. The air below was ice, cold, thick with the smell of rotting stone and rusted iron. The tunnel was narrow, just wide enough for one person to crouch through. The walls were dry and cracked, like they had survived hundreds of desert seasons. Jackson carried 2 of the unconscious women, while Nayeli supported the 3rd. Darkness closed in around them. But Nayeli's Apache eyes never lost their way. This used to be a mine? Jackson asked in a hushed voice. Nayeli gave a faint nod, whispering back, an abandoned silver mine. Shut down 60 years ago. What few know is, the government repurposed it. Repurposed it for what? She did not answer right away. The dim light from a wall-mounted torch flickered across her strong, determined face. You will see. They walked several hundred feet before the tunnel opened into a wide chamber. A massive steel door stood ahead, covered in dust, yet still radiating the authority of something once owned by the military. Beside it was an old electronic panel, its yellow light blinking weakly. Jackson's eyes widened. What the hell is this? Nayeli pressed her finger to the panel and entered a code she knew by heart. The steel door groaned, then slowly slid open, revealing a deep chamber beyond untouched remnants of Cold War-era tech. Briefing rooms, filing cabinets, wall-mounted circuit boards, dust-covered intercoms. Welcome to the Witness Protection Center. That got left behind. She said it like she was guiding him into a place that once held hope, but now was just a graveyard of broken promises. Jackson looked around, trying to make sense of the chaos. The government used this place to protect who? Nayeli gently laid the unconscious women onto old mattresses in a makeshift medical room. Then she turned, locking eyes with Jackson. To protect victims like us. Or they used to. What do you mean? Her face darkened, eyes turning sharp as mountain stone. Some agents sold the location of safe houses to the traffickers. The man leading the hunt, Morrison, he used to work here. Jesus Christ, Jackson whispered, a chill running down his spine. Just then, the old intercom let out a sharp burst of static, then fell silent. But from the way Nayeli reacted, Jackson knew that was not normal. What's wrong? He asked. Nayeli glanced up at the rusted camera in the ceiling. The system detected movement at the entrance. They are inside the mine. Jackson gripped his gun tightly. They know about this place? Nayeli's voice turned grim. if Morrison is leading them. He knows every brick down here. The steel door behind them began to shut, with a deep, echoing groan like the lid of a tomb sealing shut. "Jackson," Nayeli said slowly, her voice low and heavy. "From now on, there is no going back. Thank you for being here with me. If this story reminded you of the old days, the red dust afternoons, the sound of hooves echoing in your chest, subscribe to my channel, so that every day we can sit together once more, and I can share with you another tale from the Wild West." The control room lay deep underground in total darkness, lit only by a few flickering fluorescent tubes barely clinging to life. When Nayeli powered up the system, the large screen in front of them blinked to life, showing grainy black and white camera feeds scattered throughout the mine. Jackson spotted shadows moving through the entrance tunnel. Not just one, but several. Nayeli's voice dropped, heavy with tension. "They've reached level 3. That fast? It means someone is guiding them." Jackson frowned. "Who could guide them, unless they knew the layout?" Nayeli turned to him, her eyes sharp as blades. "There's only one person, Morrison." Right then, one of the camera feeds switched views, revealing a squad of agents in black gear, handguns drawn, earpieces in, moving with complete confidence. In the middle of the group walked a man holding a flashlight, his posture disturbingly calm. Nayeli clenched her jaw. "That's him, that goddamn snake." As the camera zoomed in, Jackson saw Morrison's face, not the rough kind you would expect from a criminal, but the clean, composed look of a polished bureaucrat. Slicked back hair, eyes cold like metal. "No emotion," Jackson whispered. "He doesn't look like the kind of man who'd do something so vile." Nayeli let out a dry, bitter laugh. "The ones who look clean are the most dangerous. They wear the mask of decency to fool the world." The computer next to them let out a faint buzz. An old system message appeared, an archived file that had never been fully deleted. Nayeli opened it. A blurry video began to play, a hand signing off on witness data transfer. The name on the document, Agent Morrison. Jackson stared, stunned. "So it really was him who leaked your info?" Nayeli nodded. "He sold us to the traffickers, and now that he knows we're still alive, he's here to clean up the loose ends." A soft click echoed through the camera feed. Morrison looked up directly into the lens, as if he knew Nayeli was watching from the other side. He gave a cold, calculated smile, then spoke into his radio. His voice crackled through the control room speakers. "Nayeli, I know you're watching. You've run far, but today, it ends." Jackson felt an icy chill down his spine. Nayeli gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning pale. "He wants us to be afraid, but the only thing he's afraid of is the truth getting out." Jackson turned to her. "You have proof?" Nayeli nodded toward a row of dusty file cabinets, old surveillance tapes, and government-labeled hardware. "Everything. But someone has to bring it into the light." "What do you mean?" She looked him dead in the eyes, part command, part plea. "Jackson, you're the only one they don't have a file on. You're the only one who can make sure this truth survives." Right then, a loud boom rang out in the distance. The camera feed for the steel door flickered, then went black. Jackson asked quickly, "What just happened?" Nayeli took a deep breath, her gaze sharp as a blade. "They've breached the outer gate. Morrison is heading to level 4. She turned, loading a fresh clip into her old handgun. "Get ready, Jackson Hale. They're not here to negotiate." Metallic footsteps echoed down the underground corridor, each step sharp and deliberate. Jackson could hear Morrison's voice ringing through his team's radio. "Team 1, sweep left. Team 2, move down the cable shaft. He's not trained, just a cheap rancher. Do not let him waste our time." Nayeli leaned toward the screen, jaw clenched tight. "Did you hear that? He does not even see you as a threat. Does not matter," Jackson said, his hand skimming the control panel. "I am not here for his approval." Nayeli looked at him, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. Jackson spotted a large, faded red button labeled Emergency Broadcast Protocol. He pointed at it. "This still work?" Nayeli stepped forward and turned the power lever. A yellow light blinked to life. If the system's still alive, it will live stream every feed from the control room's cameras to emergency channels once linked to government networks. Media, watchdog groups, some off-grid servers. Enough to drive Morrison mad, Jackson said. Nayeli gave a slight, sharp smile. And enough to stop him from shooting recklessly like he usually does. A loud boom shook the floor. Dust trickled from the ceiling like desert sand caught in a dust devil. Nayeli glanced at the camera feed. Level 4 breach team. They're here. Jackson placed his hand on the activation button. It's now or never. Nayeli nodded. Jackson pressed activate. Every screen in the control room lit up. Alarms began to flash. A robotic female voice echoed through the speakers. Broadcast sequence initiated. Secure channels engaged. Images of Jackson and Nayeli filled every feed. The data was transmitting live, irreversible. Immediately, Morrison's voice crackled through his radio, this time panicked and losing control. Shut it down. Find the source. I want that room sealed. Nayeli smirked. Now he's scared. Jackson stared into the camera. Voice steady as steel. I am Jackson Hale. I am inside an abandoned witness protection facility. Here. I've witnessed corrupt federal agents, including Morrison, pursuing 4 Apache women who survived human trafficking. I am releasing all evidence right now. Morrison roared over the radio. Kill that signal. Now! At that moment, the steel door to the control room slammed with a heavy jolt from outside. Nayeli raised her gun, moving into cover. Jackson! He's here! Jackson swallowed hard, gripping the broadcast mic tightly. No one should have the power to bury the truth. The control room door burst open. Morrison stepped in, calm on the outside, but with fury flashing in his eyes, rage at being exposed to the entire world. You just dug your own grave, rancher. Jackson met his gaze without blinking. No, I dug yours. In the moment Morrison stepped into the control room, everything seemed to slow down. Red emergency lights flashed in rapid pulses. The broadcast roared through every emergency channel, and behind him, armed agents poured in like a flood. Morrison pointed directly at Jackson. Shut it down. Right. Now. Jackson did not move. He kept the microphone close, staring straight at Morrison as if looking into the face of the man who had dragged so many into hell. The world is watching you, Morrison. For the first time, Morrison's face twitched. He lunged forward, ripping the transmitter from Jackson's hands, but it was too late. The system's green light glowed steadily. The data was out. There was no taking it back. Nayeli stood behind the server tower, gun raised, her voice calm and steady. It's over, Morrison. Today, there's no place left for you to hide. He spun around, eyes burning red. You think a few old videos and the word of some washed-up rancher can bring me down? Jackson replied. Not a few files. All the records in this facility, and thousands of people watching the live stream. At that moment, another sound filled the air. Helicopters. Not one, but several. Nayeli looked up, whispering, "The press." They actually came. The hallway cameras showed beams of light sweeping across the mine entrance. Groups marked with logos from major news networks were touching down, camera crews hauling gear, reporters shouting into microphones. We are witnessing a critical situation unfolding right now in Arizona. Sources confirm involvement of corrupt federal agents tied to human trafficking operations. From the opposite direction, another force emerged, fully equipped federal agents. Clearly not aligned with Morrison. Marked with official insignia and full tactical gear. Inside the control room, one of them shouted through a megaphone, "Drop your weapons. All unauthorized agents on your knees. Now." Morrison's men hesitated. Just for a second. Then one dropped his weapon, another removed his earpiece, and the dominoes began to fall. Only Morrison remained standing, isolated in the middle of the room. He looked around the cameras filming him live, the evidence plastered across every screen. And the real federal agents closing in. He screamed, a mix of rage and desperation. "You do not understand. I was following orders." One of the agents grabbed him, twisted his arms behind his back, and cuffed him. "You are under arrest for federal corruption, human trafficking, and the murder of protected witnesses. You can explain in court." Nayeli watched, her eyes wide as if, for the first time, she truly believed the nightmare might end. Jackson let out a long breath, his back against the wall, exhausted but finally relieved. One of the official agents walked up to Jackson. "You were the one who triggered the signal. right? Thank you. You just saved a lot of lives. Jackson glanced at Nayeli and the three Apache women, now slowly waking. No, I just helped the right people. In the control room, Morrison was dragged away, the harsh glow of camera lights hitting his face like a final sentence. The next morning, on the land that had once known only deadly silence, now stood lines of ambulances, federal vehicles, and news helicopters circling overhead. The area around the mine was cordoned off like a battlefield after the final shot. The Apache women were brought out after the medical team confirmed they had survived the worst. 3 were still weak, but stable. Nayeli, though seriously injured, stood tall watching everything unfold, as if she refused to miss the final chapter of a long, harrowing story. A female reporter approached Jackson, microphone raised. "Mr. Hale, can you confirm that you were the one who triggered the broadcast, exposing Morrison's trafficking network?" Jackson paused briefly, then answered simply, "I just did what any decent human being should do." The reporter prepared to ask another question, but a federal agent stepped in, signaling her to back off and give the victim space. Nayeli walked over to Jackson. She was wrapped in a thin blanket, her tangled black hair draped over her shoulders. But her eyes no longer held the tension of the night before. Now, there was something calm in them, like someone who had finally broken free after years in chains. "Jackson," she said softly. He turned to her. "You feeling okay?" Nayeli smiled gently, the first real smile he had ever seen on her face. "Better than ever. We thought we would die out here, but you changed everything." Jackson shook his head. "It wasn't me. It was the truth." Nayeli stepped closer, her voice dropping low. "For 4 years, we ran, hid, lived in fear. But today," she looked out across the vast land, where the early sunlight cast a soft gold over the valley. "Today, the fear ends." A senior agent approached them with a document in hand. "Jackson Hale, the government has decided to designate this area as a human trafficking victim sanctuary zone. You are the legal owner of the land, so we'd like you to serve as its civilian guardian, a kind of steward and protector." Jackson looked stunned. "Me? I'm just a broke rancher." Nayeli placed a hand on his arm, her voice firm. "Sometimes the poorest man is the only one who cannot be bought." Jackson looked at the 4 Apache women, at the once barren land, now lit by the power of truth. He took a deep breath, then nodded. "All right. I'll do it." In the distance, the news helicopters pulled away, leaving behind the gentle silence of the desert. Nayeli stood beside him, her hair flowing in the wind toward the rising sun. 4 years of running," she whispered, eyes softly closed. "Today, we stop," Jackson replied, voice deep and steady. "And starting today, this will be home for all of us. There are people in this world with no wealth, no power, no names written in history books, but the world keeps turning because of them. They are the ones who stop their truck when someone falls, who reach out when others are drowning in despair, who choose the right path no matter how hard it is. Their kindness is quiet, asks for nothing in return, but it has the power to change the fate of those the world has forgotten. And sometimes, all it takes is one such person to make the darkness retreat." It has been an honor to share this story with you. I truly hope that peace and happiness find their way into your life. I love you all, my dear listeners of Wild West Storytelling. Tell me what you thought of this story in the comments below. Type the number 8 if you enjoyed it. And do not forget to subscribe so you never miss another thrilling tale from the Wild West. Tonight, you must sleep with both of us. That is the rule for anyone who buys this house. Those were the words spoken by the 2 giant Apache sisters to the new owner of the ranch. Boone Whitmore pulled his old horse up the final slope, catching sight of the silent wooden rooftop nestled in the valley, the ranch he had traded all his savings and his last shred of hope for. The desert wind swept through, carrying the scent of dry earth and a foreboding that Boone could not quite explain. He stepped onto the weathered porch, his hand resting on the door latch. The door creaked open with the sound of a too-late warning. Then he froze. In the dim light of the house, 2 Apache women stood shoulder to shoulder like warrior statues. Both were taller than him, with broad shoulders and muscles that looked carved from red stone. One had long black hair and eyes as sharp as a blade Sahiri. The other had deep auburn hair and forearms strung tight like a drawn bow Nyota. Neither moved. The air was so heavy, it felt like one more breath would splinter the wood. Sahiri took half a step forward, her voice low and steady, like a ceremonial drumbeat. "Tonight, you must sleep with both of us. That is the rule for anyone who buys this house." Boone felt his blood run in reverse. His throat went dry. His hand instinctively drifted to the grip of his revolver. He did not know if this was a trap, a threat, or the beginning of a much darker tale. Only one thing was certain. He had not bought a ranch. He had stepped into a storm. Boone Whitmore stood frozen for a few seconds, his heart pounding like the sound of hooves in the night. He had thought he was buying a rundown ranch. He had no idea he was buying a breathing nightmare. Boone took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice steady. "What Rula are you talking about?" Nyota, the red-haired one, clearly the more fiery, pointed to the wooden table. A piece of animal hide was laid out neatly on top, the handwriting crude but unmistakable. "The last owner left it," she said. Her lips pressed tight with a mix of anger and shame. Boone stepped closer. The towering shadows of the two Apache sisters loomed over his back like canyon walls. He picked up the hide. Just reading the first line made his knees weaken. Agreement between Marcus Vance and two female laborers. Marcus Vance. That name bled through his thoughts like ink in water. The man who had sold him this ranch. Boone flipped to the next page. Each word sent a deeper chill down his spine. The land buyer must continue to take care of the two Apache sisters living in the house. Must share home and body as needed. Must not expel them, as they are part of the property. A contract soaked in filth. He threw the hide back on the table. "What kind of sick joke is this?" Sahiri did not react. She simply stood there with an empty stare, the stare of someone who had endured too much for too long. "Marcus's law is not our law," Sahiri said quietly. "But we had nothing else left to hold on to." Boone looked around the house. A dining table with one leg broken, a cold, dead fireplace, tools and furniture scattered and broken, and in the corner of the room, black scratch marks on the floor, like something heavy had been dragged. A feeling welled up in his chest, one he knew too well. The feeling of someone who had been thrown into the mud by life. Boone asked gently, "What did Marcus do to you?" No answer came at first. Then Nyota snapped. "He lived with us. Promised we would build this ranch together. Promised he would take care of our family." Her shoulders trembled. "Then he worked us from dawn until midnight. Building fences, digging wells, clearing land, hunting game. Everything," Sahiri added, her voice heavy as iron. "When the ranch finally started to come together, he sold it, took the money, and vanished." The silence that followed felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. Nyota stared directly at Boone, her dark eyes red with the tears she was holding back. "We thought you were someone Marcus hired to continue the deal." Boone stood still. For the first time since stepping into the house, the two women no longer looked like warriors. They looked like two people who had been left behind, worn down, wounded, and desperate enough to cling to a filthy piece of hide. Boone drew a breath. His eyes softened. "Listen," he said, his voice slow and steady as hardwood. "I do not do that. I do not touch anyone. And I do not follow the rules of Marcus Vance." The sisters looked at him, a mix of suspicion and hope in their eyes. Boone placed both hands on the wooden table and spoke each word clearly. "From now on, if you choose to stay here, everything follows my rules. No one gets forced. No one belongs to anyone. And no one will ever kneel under Marcus's shadow again." For the first time, Sahiri's stare seemed to flicker, as if a small storm inside her had just begun to settle. Boone Whitmore's words dropped into the old wooden house like a quiet spark, small, but strong enough to shake the heavy air that had hung there for far too long. The two Apache women did not believe him right away. But their eyes that had grown used to violence and betrayal, had begun to waver. Sahiri was the first to speak. Her voice was low, like a drum summoning the wind. "No white man has ever said those words to us." Boone leaned back against the table, his hands trembling slightly from the weight of the story that had begun to unfold. "I am not Marcus," he said slowly, "but I need to understand everything before we decide anything." A long silence followed. The wind howled at the door, slipping through the cracks in the wall and making the oil lamp flicker like it was about to die. Then Nyota, the fiercer of the two, began to speak. My sister and I were orphaned young. Our tribe was driven from our land. And we drifted south. When we met Marcus, he said he needed strong people to build a ranch. He promised fair pay. He said he respected the Apache. She let out a bitter laugh, a sound more painful than crying. We believed him. Sahiri clenched her fists, the veins in her arms standing out like taut ropes. At first, he really was kind, gave us separate rooms, gave us food, gave us a promise that this would be home. Her voice grew quiet, almost swallowed by the shadows. Then, when things started to get better, he began to change. Boone stayed silent, his heart pulling tight like something was being dragged through it. Nyota picked up the story, her voice now sharp as a blade carving stone. He wanted us to pay him back. He twisted his promise into a contract, said if we did not agree, he would throw us off the land. And by then, there was nowhere else that would take Apache women like us. She took a long breath, her eyes red but dry. We worked ourselves to the bone, built every foot of fence, dug every bucket of dirt, hauled every drop of water, and him. Nyota clenched her fists so tightly her knuckles turned white. He gambled in town and brought his debts back here. Boone looked around the room, the bruise on Sahiri's arm, the cracks in the wall, the worn tools down to the handle. Everything matched the story. It was not the two Apache warrior women who had broken this ranch. It was Marcus. Sayuri spoke quietly. When he sold the land, we thought he would keep his word, share the profit with us. She shook her head, but he took it all, disappeared into the night. Left behind that filthy piece of hide, to turn us into a burden for whoever bought this place. Boone felt his throat tighten, not from anger at Marcus, but because he saw something. He recognized people thrown off a cliff by someone they had once trusted. He spoke softly, but with solid conviction. You do not deserve to live under that law, and you sure as hell do not deserve to be treated like property. The sisters looked at him. For the first time, there was no suspicion, only pain, exhaustion, and a faint flickering hope, like the oil lamp beside them. Nyota asked, her voice on the edge of breaking. Then, what do we do, Boone Whitmore? Boone looked at the two tall, strong women who now stood shattered before him. We start over, he said, low and firm. No contracts forced on anyone. Just this land. And the three of us, if you are willing. And in that moment, inside a broken wooden house beneath a trembling oil lamp, something truly changed. The desert wind shifted, sweeping across the porch with a whisper of dust and an eerie silence. Boone Whitmore looked at the two Apache sisters standing before him, women nearly as tall as the doorway, with shoulders broader than most men he had ever known. And yet, in their eyes now, there was only pain. Boone laid Marcus's hide contract back on the table, then pushed it aside like someone clearing a stone out of their path. His contract means nothing now, he said, his voice steady. All we have between us is this, mutual respect and a willingness to work together. Sahiri looked at him for a long moment. You do not know how strong we are, she said. We can haul whole logs, carry grain sacks twice the weight of the town's men, but no one ever taught us how to start over. Boone answered gently, I do not know either. But I do know how to begin a job. One step at a time. Nyota, the quicker, more fiery one, crossed her arms, her muscles tight like ropes drawn to the edge. What do you gain by helping us? This land is drying out. The granary is empty. The debt is so bad even the townfolk stay away. Not for gain, Boone replied, because we are more alike than you think. I was cheated too, lost everything, and had to start again from nothing. Nyota blinked. She was not used to hearing men speak such bare truth. Sahiri lowered her head, as if accepting something heavier than her anger at Marcus. Boone Whitmore, if we stay here under this new agreement, will you leave us too? That question cut deep, not because she doubted him, but because for too many years, all they had known was the fear of being abandoned. Boone did not answer with words right away. He walked over to the door and opened it, gesturing out toward the vast prairie soaked in the copper glow of the dying Sunday. This land needs all three of us, he said. No one can carry it alone. Then he turned back, looking directly at the two towering women. You are the strongest people I have ever met, but no matter how strong you are, everyone needs a place to belong. Those words brought silence to the entire house. Sahiri looked over at Nyota, as if searching for shared understanding. Nyota gave a small nod. Just a nod. But it carried the surrender of a heart that had been holding too much for too long. Sahiri shifted her stance and stepped closer to Boone, nearly a head taller than him. Her voice dropped lower, warmer than the first time they met. Then from this moment on, we will follow the law of Boone Whitmore, Nyota added. Her voice still sharp, but softer now. Not because we are forced to, but because this is the first time we get to choose. Boone felt the shift clearly, like the first storm winds calming after a long drought. It was not a victory. It was a handshake between three people who had all been thrown to the bottom, now trying to build something decent. And in that exact moment, a new shape of hope was planted on this dying ranch. Thank you for being here with me. Let us know where you are watching from. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel to support what I do. I just hope that wherever you are listening from, you are safe and happy. The first morning on the new ranch looked no different than a battlefield left behind after a long siege. A thin mist clung to broken fences, and the deep footprints of the two Apache sisters marked the dirt like scars. Boone Whitmore stood in the yard, hands on his hips, surveying the wreckage in front of him. Beside him, Sahiri and Nyota stepped out of the house like living statues, muscles flexing under the early light, their breath white as smoke. Where do we begin? Sahiri asked. Boone pointed to the collapsed horse stable. Over there, without a proper stable, we cannot keep the new herd. The sisters gave a small nod. No complaints. No hesitation. They dove into the work like people used to surviving through sweat. Sahiri turned and lifted a heavy wooden beam one Boone was sure would take at least 3 town men to move. Her broad shoulders strained with power, each muscle moving like a wild creature tamed by necessity. Standing beside her, Boone felt himself shrink to half his size, but not with shame. Sahiri's strength was not for show, it was for survival. Nyota was different. She was quick, agile like a mountain cougar. Every time Boone turned around to look for a hammer or a coil of rope, she was already there, handing him exactly what he needed, exactly when he needed it, as if reading his mind. At one point, Boone chuckled. Can you see the future or something? Nyota shrugged, smirking. Work with men long enough. You learn when they are about to mess things up. Boone blushed, not from the teasing, but because that smile made his heart beat faster than usual. By noon, the 3 of them sat on the porch steps, eating cornbread hard as stone and yet strangely delicious, flavored by sweat and wind. Nyota took a drink from the water skin, set it down, and asked, Mr. Whitmore, why are you really helping us? It is not because of any law. Boone looked into her sharp black eyes, paused a few seconds, then said, because everyone deserves a fair chance. The words were simple but honest, and they made Sahiri freeze for a moment. She looked at Boone longer than she needed to. For the first time, there was no suspicion, no guarded wall, only a deep acknowledgement. By late afternoon, they had finished half the stable roof. Nyota climbed onto the beam, steadying a large plank with just one arm while Boone nailed it in place. The wind blew her hair across his face, carrying the scent of smoke, sun, and a life that had known nothing but struggle. When she climbed down, Nyota slipped slightly. Boone reached out and caught her. Her body was hard as steel, but it trembled just a little at his touch. That tremble was not fear. It was the feeling of being held, without anyone asking for something in return. For a moment, they stood closer than they needed to. Sahiri saw it from a distance. Instead of jealousy or doubt, she smiled a soft smile, like someone seeing hope for the first time in years. The long day ended in a copper sunset, with 3 tall shadows standing side by side in a field of dust. No longer a new owner and 2 left-behind souls. They looked like a team, and from the deepest corner of that dry, broken land, a fragile new sprout of what could be called a home had just begun to grow. That afternoon, clouds gathered into thick patches like black velvet, and the wind stopped completely as if the entire valley was holding its breath. Boone, Sahiri, and Nyota were loading the last planks onto the stable roof when Boone's horse suddenly let out a long, uneasy whinny. Sahiri turned instantly, eyes sharp as an axe blade. Someone's coming. Boone wiped his hands and looked down the dirt road leading into the ranch. In the distance, A cloud of dust was rising. A group of 5 or 6 riders was heading their way slow, deliberate. These were not strangers just passing through. No, that dust carried the scent of trouble. Nyota jumped down from the roof, landing as lightly as a wildcat, her muscles rippling under sun-darkened skin. "Is it them?" she asked, voice low. Boone squinted to see more clearly. As the lead rider came into view, a heavy weight pressed against his chest. Marcus Vance, the man who sold him this ranch, the man who had cornered the 2 Apache sisters, the man Boone had hoped he would never see again. Marcus rode to the edge of the yard, wearing a crooked grin like someone who had just sniffed out easy spoils. The men behind him kept their hands close to their guns, a little too ready. "Well, well," Marcus drawled. "This place looks better than it did the last time I stood here." Boone clenched his fists but kept his voice steady. "What do you want?" Marcus glanced over at Sahiri and Nyota, 2 towering women now standing firmly at Boone's side. Their presence like carved pillars that any man would think twice about challenging. His grin turned bitter. "Just as I thought. They are still here." Nyota stepped forward. Just one step, but the earth beneath her foot sank half an inch. "Do not say our names with that voice," she growled. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I have every right. I used to own this ranch. I used to own them." Those words cracked the air. Sahiri's fists whitened with pressure. Nyota looked like a drawn bow about to snap. Boone stepped forward, standing between them. "No one belongs to you anymore, Marcus." Marcus let out a loud, hollow laugh, the kind of laugh men use when they think nothing can touch them. "You think a few coins give you that, right? Mr. Boone, I am here to take back what is mine." "What part?" Boone asked, his voice cold as shattered stone. "This ranch," Marcus said plainly. "You paid for the land, but the living property," his eyes locked on the Apache sisters, "still belongs to me." Sahiri stepped forward, voice deep as a ceremonial drumbeat. "Try us." Marcus did not back down. He gave a small nod. All 5 men behind him placed their hands on their guns. The valley fell silent, like the world holding its breath before the storm breaks. Boone placed his hand on the grip of his Colt. Unafraid. He knew what was coming. He knew Marcus did not just want land. He wanted control again, wanted to see the 2 Apache sisters kneel like they once had. No, that would never happen again, not today. Sahiri whispered, "Boone, do not fight for us." Boone replied softly, "I am not fighting for you." He gripped his revolver tighter. "I am fighting for justice." For the first time all afternoon, a cold wind swept through the valley. The storm had officially begun. The wind picked up, sweeping dry dust into spirals in front of the house as if drawing a line of life and death into the earth. Marcus remained on horseback, smirking. "I will say this one last time. Step aside, Boone. This is not your business." Boone stood tall, eyes cold but steady. "Then you had better prepare your last words, because I am not standing down." Marcus sneered and gave a small signal. 2 of his gunmen moved out, forming a wide arc trying to surround them. What they did not expect was that standing in front of them was not just one lean Boone Whitmore, but 2 towering Apache warrior women. Sahiri stood on Boone's left, shoulders as broad as a grown man's. Black hair tied back, eyes sharp as a blade honed to its final edge. Nyota stood on his right, fast and fierce, like a wildfire. Her long legs bent slightly, the stance of a predator ready to strike. Marcus barked, "Take down the women first. We will deal with Boone after." The gunman on the left reached for his pistol, but Sahiri was faster. She surged forward just 3 long strides to close the entire yard. Her punch, as massive and solid as a timber beam, drove straight into the man's chest. A crack echoed. He flew backward off his saddle, landing in the dirt. Writhing, Nyota let out a low growl. She lunged right, sliding low like a cat over sand. Grabbing the ankle of the second man, he toppled over, his gun flying into the air. She caught it between 2 fingers and spun, slamming the butt into his temple. Boone drew his Colt. His voice dropped low. "Stop this, Marcus." But Marcus had already drawn his gun, hands shaking not from fear, but from rage. "I lost everything because of those 2 women. I will not let them have a new life." The hammer clicked. Boone raised his gun, but Marcus aimed, not at him, but at Sahiri. In that instant, time shrank into a single thread. Nyota shouted, "Sister!" Boone did not think, did not hesitate. He threw himself into Sahiri, pushing her hard to the side. The gunshot cracked. Smoke burst from the barrel like the breath of a demon. Boone staggered. The bullet only grazed his coat, but the fall knocked him out of position and down into the thin dust. Marcus cursed, raising his aim again. But this time, Sahiri stood up. Not a tremble in her. She walked straight toward Marcus, eyes black and deep like a moonless night. "You have taken too much from us," she said, her voice low as falling stone. "Right now we take it back." She grabbed Marcus by the collar just as he pulled the trigger. The shot rang out but went wide, thrown off by her grip. Nyota leapt in. In 2 heartbeats, Marcus was torn from his horse, his gunman scattered, his face planted into the dirt. Boone rose to his feet, breathing hard, watching the 2 Apache sisters pin the man who had wrecked their lives. Sahiri hauled Marcus up and tossed him toward Boone. "You decide," she said. "If you let him live, he will never come back." Boone looked at Marcus trembling. Filthy. Like a cornered animal dragged from its hole. He turned his Colt, popped out the spent shell, and said, voice hoarse but firm, "Turn him over to the town. The law will handle the rest." Sahiri and Nyota looked at him, not with ordinary gratitude, but with something deeper, a light found only in those who are seeing true kindness for the first time in their lives. 6 months passed. From what was once a crumbling ranch, a new life had risen. Straight fences now ran along the hills. The horse stable had been rebuilt with the sturdiest wood in the valley. The granary no longer howled with the wind through holes, but echoed with the daily thud of sacks being stacked, full of grain. But the most profound change was the rhythm of the house. Sahiri, the older sister, now stood out front every morning, watching over the horses with the patience of someone who had spent half her life carrying more than her share. Her shoulders were strong as beams, but her eyes had softened, rarely sharp now, unlike the first day Boone met her. Nyota was in the kitchen, barefoot on the wooden floor, flipping corn cakes while giggling at Boone's awkward jokes. She was still fast, still fiery, but now her fire gave off warmth. No longer a flame of defense, but the hearth of a home. And Boone was fixing the oil lamp on the porch, hands moving with ease. His face relaxed in a way it had not been for years, finally learning what peace felt like. Just like that, 3 people, each carrying wounds of their own, lived together, breathed together, as if they had belonged to each other long before they ever met. One evening, the 3 of them sat on the porch, watching the sun melt into the horizon. The golden light rested gently on their shoulders, turning Sahiri and Nyota's muscles into bronze like living statues carved from the earth. Boone spoke slowly. "The day I came here, I thought I had bought a nightmare." Sahiri did not look at him. She simply said, low enough for all 3 to hear, "And we thought God had sent another man to trample what was left of our lives." Nyota let out a soft laugh and leaned her head on Boone's shoulder like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Turns out we were all wrong." Boone looked at the 2 Apache sisters, the strongest women he had ever known, strong in body, stronger in heart. "No," he said, "we were not wrong. We just arrived at the right time." The evening breeze drifted through, carrying the scent of warm earth and corn roasting in the kitchen. No one said anything else. They did not need to. Some kinds of love are born in silence, in moments when 3 hearts quietly agree that no matter how wide the world is, all they truly need is one thing: a home built not of wood, but of trust and kindness. As night fell, Boone stood and lit a fire out in the yard. Sahiri brought more wood. Nyota carried a thick blanket for all 3 of them. 3 shadows, 1 lonely man and 2 Apache warrior women, their bodies forged like the wild strength of the mountains, sat close by the fire. Boone looked at them, the flames dancing in his eyes. "This," he whispered, "is our home." And from that night on, none of them were ever alone again. Dear friend, there are wounds you cannot see with your eyes, only hear in the way someone goes quiet. And there are hands that may not be strong, but still gentle enough to touch the deepest pain without breaking it further. In the Wild West, a land of dust storms and betrayal, kindness remains the one thing that never runs dry. It does not shout. It simply stands there, like a small flame, keeping a tired heart warm, because sometimes a single act of kindness is enough to heal an entire life. In the end, I truly hope that you, wherever you are, will always find happiness and peace. I love you, the cherished audience of Wild West storytelling. Tell me what you felt about this story. Leave a comment below. Tap 1 if you enjoyed this journey. And do not forget to subscribe so you never miss another powerful tale from the wild frontier. The wind howled and lashed against the wooden walls, as if trying to rip the cabin apart. Samuel Drake sat by the fire. Then, suddenly a faint knock echoed through the howling wind. Samuel frowned. In this kind of weather, even wild animals would not dare to roam. He sprang to his feet, walked to the door, opened it, and his heart nearly stopped. On the snow-covered ground knelt two large, muscular Apache women, huddled tightly together. Their lips were purple, their hair frozen to their faces, and their breaths were shallow, like they only had a few left. They were nearly naked beneath scraps of torn cloth. The one in front, Nayeli, lifted her head, her dark golden eyes flickering. She reached out, trying to cling to the doorway. Her voice was hoarse, almost broken. "I need the warmth of a man like you." Everyone turned us away. Samuel froze. His mind urged him to shut the door to avoid trouble, to stay safe. But his heart had seen too many people die in the cold. He bent down and picked up Sahale, the girl who was barely hanging on. Then he wrapped his arms around Nayeli. Their bodies were heavy and cold as ice. As he pulled the door closed, the wind wailed like the cry of darkness being left behind. Samuel said, "I will not leave anyone outside during a storm. Come in." The two women collapsed beside the fireplace, their breathing faint, and Samuel, as he sat down next to them, had no idea that this stormy night would open a whole new path for three souls abandoned by the world. The fireplace glowed red all night. Its warmth spread through the damp, chilly wooden walls. But Samuel could not take his eyes off the two large bodies curled up together on the dry deer hide. Now and then, Nayeli trembled gently, trying to keep Sahale, the one more severely injured, from getting colder. The strong muscles along her shoulders and back shivered violently from the fever. Sahale, on the other hand, breathed in short, shallow bursts, as if a single strong gust of wind might carry her soul away. Samuel placed his hand on their foreheads to check. Ice cold. He slowly pulled another wool blanket over both of them. Inside the small cabin, only the crackle of firewood and the whistling wind seeping through wooden cracks could be heard. The red glow lit up three people. Two Apache women, statuesque like ancient warrior goddesses, and an old rancher whose eyes had seen too much sorrow. On the first morning, Nayeli opened her eyes. She looked around, alert, like a wounded animal. Nayeli said, "Sahale." "Where is she?" Samuel replied. "Right next to you. Still breathing. Slow, but alive." She reached out and gently touched Sahale's face. Her eyes turned red. Nayeli said, "If she dies, I have no one left." Samuel said nothing. He understood that feeling more than anyone. Days passed. Snow still blanketed the windows. Samuel ground herbs, boiled water, changed bandages. The two women were still far too weak to move. He made soup, coaxing them to drink it, spoon by spoon. Though strong, Nayeli often glanced at him with guarded eyes. One evening, as Samuel set the pot of porridge near the fire, Nayeli asked quietly, "Why are you helping us? Every man stays away from my tribe." Samuel did not turn around. He simply pushed the logs deeper into the flames. "I once left someone behind in a storm, and I have regretted it for many years." He paused. "I will not do it a second time." The words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. The next day, Sahale fully woke up, her deep black eyes blinking slowly like a lost child. "Sahale." "Where are we?" Samuel replied. "My cabin. The storm has not passed yet. You should stay until you are strong again." She looked at him for a long time, then whispered, "Thank you, even though I do not know why you would risk helping us." In that small cabin, three wounded souls lived together through the longest winter of their lives. No one asked about the past. They simply shared the fire, the food, and the quiet presence of others who had once been cast aside by the world. Samuel did not know what was changing, but he could feel it clearly. In the warmth of the fire, something was slowly beginning to melt. The storm had not let up. Snow piled thick on the cabin's roof. Inside the wooden room, the warmth from the fire kept the three of them from shivering as they once had, but the silence was slowly becoming heavy. Sahale was now able to sit up, though a long gash still ran down her back. Nayeli was stronger, but her face always seemed to be holding something back. One gray afternoon, as Samuel was feeding more wood into the fire, Nayeli suddenly spoke. "Do you want to know why we were left outside to die?" Samuel did not turn around, but his eyes shifted toward them through the dim reflection in the mirror. "Only if you want to tell me." Sahale gently touched her sister's shoulder, as if asking permission. Then it was she, the calmer one, who began. "We are not criminals, but we were cast out from the tribe." Samuel. "Why?" A long silence followed. The two sisters looked at each other, an exchange full of years of pain. Sahale. "Because we could not give the chief a child. He is old, his strength is gone, but he blamed the women instead." Nayeli's voice trembled, her hands clenched into fists. The muscles on her strong arms flexed, like trying to hold back her rage. "They said we had no worth, that we did not carry the tribe's blood, that we were not worthy to stay." Sahale lowered her head, her voice barely a whisper. "They said we were a bad omen, not allowed to exist in winter." Samuel tightened his grip on the piece of firewood. He knew too well the feeling of being pushed away from a place you once belonged. "Samuel, it was not your fault." "Nayeli. But the whole tribe believed it was. They beat us and drove us out. We ran for 2 days, with nothing but our lives." In that moment, Samuel saw it more clearly than ever. These two Apache women, despite their powerful muscles, despite their statuesque warrior-like bodies, carried in their eyes a pain deeper than any winter snow could match. Samuel set the firewood down and stepped closer. "Here, no one sees you as a curse. You are just people trying to survive." Nayeli looked at him for a long time. Her dark golden eyes, once filled with suspicion, now held something else, a small but real flicker of trust. Sahale said, "Are you not afraid of us, Samuel? If you wanted to hurt me, you would have done it the moment you woke up." The two sisters looked at each other, then let out a soft laugh, the first laugh in the cabin since the day they arrived. Outside, the wind still howled, but inside the small room, a truth had just been spoken, and it was like a piece of ice had melted. 3 days later, the snowstorm began to ease. The wind no longer howled, it was now just a soft chill, like winter breathing a quiet sigh. Through the foggy window, Samuel saw a faint glimmer of sunlight behind the thick curtain of clouds. Nayeli stepped up beside him, a thick blanket draped around her shoulders. "The snow is starting to melt," Samuel replied. "Yes. This winter came faster than any I can remember." She tilted her head to look at him, her eyes calm but holding something deeper, something hard to name. Over the past few days, the cabin had become more than just a place to wait out a storm. It had become a shelter for 3 hearts, slowly learning to heal. Sahale laughed more. Nayeli let down her guard, and Samuel felt this house a little less empty. That morning, while the 2 women still slept, Samuel closed the cabin door, threw on his leather coat, and stepped outside. The snow still reached his knees, but he walked far out behind the pine trees, to a place where the remains of an old foundation still lay. He stood there for hours in silence, then began to rebuild, plank by rotting plank. The steady sound of a hammer echoed across the white landscape, like a quiet declaration he could not yet say out loud. By afternoon, when the snow had stopped falling, Nayeli and Sahale found him standing in the middle of a rough wooden frame. Sahale said, "Samuel, what are you doing?" He set down the hammer and wiped his forehead. "Samuel, building an extra room." Nayeli stepped closer, her hand brushing the new wood, the breeze lifting strands of her hair. "Nayeli. For who?" Samuel looked at them, 2 strong, towering women. Yet in their eyes was a kind of vulnerability he had never seen in anyone else. "For the 2 of you. Or, for the 3 of us, if you want to stay." They stood still. Melting snow dripped from the pine branches above, falling on their shoulders like quiet tears. "Sahale. Are you not afraid? Apache and white people, they are not meant to live together." Samuel shook his head. I do not care what the world thinks. I only know. This place is not just a shelter. Nayeli looked deep into his eyes, her voice low and raspy. Then how long do you want us to stay with you, Samuel? Until the snow falls again? Until spring comes? Until you decide to leave? Or never do? Sahale placed her hand on the fresh wood, smiling a gentle smile that looked almost out of place on her strong face. Samuel, we are not going anywhere. Nayeli stepped closer, standing beside him, her breath warm in the winter air. Nayeli said, if you give us a place to begin again, we will call this place home. And right at that moment, the last patch of snow slid from the cabin roof, as if winter had finally given in, making way for something new. I am deeply grateful for your presence here. If this story brought back memories of dusty afternoons, of hoofbeats echoing in your heart, subscribe to my channel, so that each day we can sit together once more, and I will tell you another story from the West. The snow had stopped falling, but the chill still lingered in every crack of the wooden walls. Samuel's cabin had become the only place in the mountains that still held a rare trace of warmth. After building the extra room, something between the three of them began to shift, in a way that made Samuel pause in his work more than once. Breathing a little slower than usual, in the late afternoons, Sahale would sit on the porch, her large hands carefully sharpening Samuel's hunting knife. The pale sunlight touched her usually stoic face, and somehow, she looked gentler than ever. Nayeli, on the other hand, split firewood. Every swing of her axe was powerful and precise, the muscles in her shoulders moving clearly beneath the fur wrap she wore. There were moments when Samuel looked over at the two sisters and felt for the first time that this cabin truly had life inside it. On a windless afternoon, the three of them sat together on the porch. The sun peeked out through the gray sky, its light faint but warm. Sahale smiled softly as she looked upward. It has been a long time since the sun looked this beautiful. Samuel lifted his gaze in the same direction and replied slowly, with people here, everything looks brighter. A die. A die. A die. Nayeli turned to him instantly, her expression half serious, half playful. You mean, the cabin feels less lonely? The question struck something deep inside Samuel. He did not answer. He simply exhaled. Sahale set the knife down and scooted a little closer, her voice soft, as if afraid to wake the sleeping winter wind. We see it, Samuel. The sadness in your eyes dotted is the same sadness we carry. Samuel lowered his head. Images of his wife and child passed through his mind like pale ghosts behind him. Nayeli moved in closer as well, the warmth of her large body pulling the air tighter around them. She placed her strong hand over the back of his, her voice low and honest. You opened the door for us that night. No one ever did that. No one ever looked at us as people. Sahale leaned her head gently on Samuel's shoulder, so gently it made his heart tighten. If it had not been for you, we would have died in the snow. Samuel looked at them both. Their eyes were as strong as the mountains, yet soft as melting ice. He spoke quietly, his voice deep and real. I opened the door, because I know what it feels like to be left outside in the cold night. No one deserves that. Nayeli gave his hand a gentle squeeze. Between the three of them, something was beginning to grow slowly, quietly, and there was no going back. Winter slowly began to retreat. Melted snow trickled down the cabin roof, each drop falling with a quiet rhythm, like the first breaths of life after a long frozen silence. The pine trees surrounding Samuel's home looked greener now, their branches no longer heavy with snow. Inside the cabin, the air had changed too in a way that words could not quite capture. It was no longer just three people living together to survive the storm. It felt more like a home. That morning, Samuel rose early. As he tended to the fire, he heard slow footsteps behind him. Sahale stood there, her hand resting gently on her stomach, her gaze distant. But in her eyes, there was something new, something like astonishment, tangled with hope. She touched his shoulder lightly, her voice soft as morning mist. Samuel, something feels different inside me. From behind, Nayeli stepped forward, her expression just as strange. She placed a hand over her own belly, as if trying to make sure the feeling was not just her imagination. Samuel, her voice was low and trembling, something in us is not the same anymore. Axi, manly, in 5. Samuel looked at them. 2 tall, powerful women once cast out by their tribe as bad omens now stood before him with eyes full of confusion, like children facing something miraculous for the first time. He stepped closer and gently placed his hand over Sahali's. There it was, a warmth. Subtle. Small, but real. Samuel's breath caught in his throat. It might be. He did not finish the sentence. But all 3 of them understood. Nayeli turned to him, her voice husky. If this is real, then it is not the miracle of spring. It is yours. Samuel gently squeezed her hand, his eyes deep and calm. If there is life growing, then it is ours. It belongs to this family. Sahale laughed through her tears. A gentle, aching kind of laugh. I never thought I could belong anywhere, and now there might be an entire life waiting for me. Nayeli stepped in closer, her broad shoulders trembling with emotion. We were cast out for not being able to bear children, but here, we are being given a new beginning. Samuel looked at them both, then to the small cabin bathed in soft golden morning light, and in that moment, he knew. He was no longer a man trapped in old grief. He had 2 companions, and maybe soon, there would be small breaths joining them. Samuel placed his hands on both of their bellies, and said in a voice steady and strong, like the pine tree outside the cabin, "This is our family. No one can take that away. No one can cast us out ever again." Outside, the early spring sunlight poured through the cabin windows, like a blessing from the earth and sky. Just as spring touched the edge of the mountains, the past of the 2 women found its way to them. That day, the wind was still. The pine forest stood silent, as if holding its breath. Samuel was checking the fence when he felt a sharp chill crawl down his spine, a gut instinct, the kind only a former soldier who had once stared death in the face could understand. On the damp earth, unfamiliar footprints had appeared. 3 at first, then 5, then more. These were not animal tracks. Someone was watching. Samuel returned to the cabin, his voice low and firm. Someone is coming. Not from around here. Sahale tightened her grip on her sleeve, her deep black eyes darkening. Nayeli glanced out the window, her gaze sharp as an axe blade. They've come for us. The 3 of them stood side by side, saying nothing more. Within just a few breaths, shadows began to appear at the edge of the forest, familiar figures with long braids, tall spears, and faces painted in tribal patterns. Leading them was an older man, tall and broad, his face cold as carved stone. It was Chief Koa, the one who had cast out Nayeli and Sahale. Nayeli stepped out onto the porch, standing tall like the pine at the top of the hill. Her voice rang out strong, unwavering. "We do not belong to you anymore. We are not coming back." Chief Koa looked at her, then at Sahale, his eyes filled with pride, wounded pride, and the arrogance of a man used to obedience. "When I cast you out, I gave you the honor of dying with dignity in winter." He spoke each word like a blade, driven straight into the heart. "But you chose to live with a white man." Samuel stepped forward, standing between the 2 women, his voice calm and steady, but without a hint of fear. "They chose to live, and I will not let anyone take them." A warrior behind the chief stepped forward, his eyes burning with warning. But Sahale answered, her voice calm and sharp as ice. "If you came to take us back, you are too late. The day you drove us out, we stopped being yours." Nayeli added, her voice hard with resolve, "We have a new family now. And this time, no one will take it from us." Chief Koa looked at the 3 of them standing together. He looked into the eyes of the 2 women, eyes that once bowed to him, now solid as mountain stone. His grip tightened on his spear. His breath trembled, just for a moment. Samuel stood firm. "Leave," he said, his voice low but powerful, like thunder. "No one here belongs to you." The forest went still. The Apache warriors looked to their chief, waiting for his command. But instead of stepping forward, Koa turned away. He said nothing. They had come with threats, but they left in silence. As their figures disappeared into the pine woods, Sahale collapsed to her knees, exhaling a heavy breath. Nayeli placed a hand on her sister's shoulder, and Samuel stood shielding them both like even if the sky fell, he would hold it up. A family had just passed its first great trial, and no one, not an old tribe, nor any storm could ever break them apart again. As the shadows of Chief Koa and the old warriors disappeared into the pine forest, the entire world seemed to exhale. A spring breeze swept through, carrying the scent of warm pine and freshly thawed earth. The last bit of winter's snow slipped from the cabin roof, landing on the damp ground with a soft thud like a quiet knock marking the end of something. Samuel stood still on the porch, his calloused hands still trembling slightly from the tension. But when he turned around, he saw Nayeli helping Sahale to her feet. The two women leaning on each other like great trees that had survived the storm. Their eyes met his warm, trusting, and full of choice. Sahale spoke softly, her voice still tight with emotion. "You stood in front of us, even when it could have cost you your life." Nayeli stepped closer, her broad shoulders bathed in the light of the setting sun. "No one has ever done that for us. No one." Samuel said nothing. He simply stepped forward and placed a hand on both their backs, a simple gesture, yet full of meaning. "We made it through," he said, slow and steady. "And from this day on, no one will ever cast you out again." The evening passed in a strange, gentle stillness, not heavy, but warm, like the earth itself taking a breath. They shared a simple dinner, stewed venison, cornbread, and herbal tea. Every glance exchanged at that table felt lighter, brighter, as if spring was not only blooming outside but inside each of them. As the fire inside the cabin crackled higher, Sahale sat close to Samuel, placing her hand softly over his. "Family is not where you are born. It is where no one leaves you behind." Nayeli smiled a strong, hopeful smile. "And we found it, Samuel. Right here." Outside, the sky turned a shade of amber, streaked with thin, silky clouds. The small wooden cabin sat nestled deep in the valley, and the light inside it was warmer than the spring sun. Samuel wrapped his arms around the two strong women who had saved his life in ways he never expected. "We will raise our children here," he said gently, but firmly. "Like a vow, they will grow up afraid of no one, running from nothing." Nayeli and Sahale leaned their heads on his shoulders like two taut strings that had finally been allowed to loosen. The spring wind danced across the meadow, stirring the tender buds just beginning to bloom. And inside the cabin, the three souls the world once cast aside sat together as a family chosen by the earth and sky. No ceremony, no grand promises, just a simple truth. They had found each other, and they had chosen one another, in the spring of a brand new life. My friends, there are wounds we believe will follow us for the rest of our lives, old memories, bitter winters that linger in the heart. But then love appears not loud, not dazzling, just quietly, like a small flame in the cold night. It does not erase the past, but it gives us the courage to face it without trembling. In that it agrees. Love is not magic, but it knows how to mend what has been broken. It puts the pieces back together to make someone new, warmer, stronger, and brave enough to believe that happiness is still waiting just ahead. It has been a true honor to share this story with you. I only hope that wherever you are, peace and happiness find you. I love you, my dear listeners of Wild West Storytelling. Tell me how you felt about this story in the comments below. Type the number 8 if it touched your heart. And do not forget to subscribe so you never miss another tale from the Wild